All right, well, thank you for joining us for the second episode of Rebel Health Collective. I've got an old friend, mentor, and diabetes guru here with me today, Trevor Watson. He is going to talk us through his experience as a father and taking care of someone that has type 1 diabetes. So we're going to go through a whole lot. I'm guessing we'll probably go over our estimated hour, but that's totally fine because you've got a ton of knowledge. But we'll go through the diagnosis, I mean, how life has changed, things he's learned, steps that he's taken, and really just how he and his wife have taken it upon themselves to ensure that their son's getting the best treatment and care and living the best life he can. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you if you want to give everybody an intro to you and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Josh. Excited for you and what you're doing here. Thanks for having me be a part of it. It's awesome. So, as you said, my name's Trevor. I've got a wife, Grace, three kids, Faye, who's 13, David, who's 11, and Hattie, who is 9. And David, who is 9, he is a type 1 diabetic. He was diagnosed about a couple weeks after his fourth birthday is when he was first diagnosed. So yeah, we've been in the type 1 diabetes club for what's 11 minus 4? 7
About seven.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah, there we go. Uh, yeah, it's a club you never want to be a part of, but when you are, it's a great, pretty amazing group of people.
definitely. Yeah, it's one of those where you don't want to punch the ticket, but
No,
once you do, it's kind of like Hotel California.
you can never
You
leave.
never leave.
100%.
So, well, I know, when I first got diagnosed, I had seen that David was a type 1, and you're one of the first people that I reached out to. So, you're one of the ones that kind of led me to this community. I mean, I was at doctor's offices and meeting these specialists and wasn't getting a lot of answers. And so just being able to have somebody to text, say, or even just say, hey, I'm on a road trip and my numbers will not go down, just even to vent to. And you say, yeah, David goes through the same things. We're trying to figure that out as well. If you figure anything out, let us know. So just having a source like that to lean on has been amazing. And it's really the group we're trying to build here.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it, man. I hate that that's what has caused us to reconnect, but I'm glad it has. It's been fun to reconnect, and it's been good to I always have it from the perspective of the dad. I don't have it. So it's I'm thankful to have somebody that I can talk to who can give me that perspective as well because I know a lot about it. I've lived a lot through it, but at the end of the day, I don't have it and it's different.
Yeah.
So it's been nice to get to hear what you go through and to have somebody that David I can point to for David because that's something I always look for people who have it, who are successful, who are handling it really well, that I can point to for David that he can see as role models. So I'm thankful to have that.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Definitely.
man.
I'm glad we were able to reconnect. But like we said, it's
Yeah,
unfortunate it's been over these terms.
yeah,
But hey,
yeah. That's a
here we
bummer.
are.
I wish he could have been, the Rangers or something else, Aggie
Right?
football,
Yeah,
but that's okay.
we'll take
Hey,
it. Well, I guess, so you mentioned that a little after 4 is when he was diagnosed. Can you walk us through, I guess, really, like, do you have any previous type 1 in your family, either you or Grace?
no, so my aunt was a type 1 diabetic and my I have a cousin who was, but
Okay.
that's nowhere near the genetic line to
Right.
where they say that it was a genetic deal. We
Okay.
don't really I don't think Grace has anybody in her family with type 1
Okay.
and that was
This
that was the
similar to me. I think I have like a great great grandma maybe.
oh
And
okay.
that was, way back in the day where
Yeah.
they just kind of said that could have been it down
Yeah.
looking at what some of her symptoms were. But okay, so it's kind of similar there. But I mean, how did you guys put together that was it? Was it just he wasn't being himself and you went to the doctor and did some testing, or did you know some of the symptoms? Because for me, I didn't know until my blood work came back. I didn't know the symptoms of type 1. I had all of them, but I had no idea that's what they meant.
Yeah, and that's something that's frustrating about it all is because just since David's diagnosis, I've wanted to make folks aware of what the symptoms are. Because if you're aware of what the symptoms are, you can get diagnosed, quickly,
Yep.
hopefully, in theory, and not let it continue on to where it's dangerous and maybe you're in DKA. So, and we weren't aware of the symptoms either, which is a really common occurrence. But we had no idea. I mean, he was for probably the 5 or 6 months leading into his when he was going to turn 4. He was wetting the bed, which he hadn't for a couple of years.
Okay, so it was like
We weren't.
a new thing that
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. So he was wetting the bed. He was urinating very often, and when he was just going for a long time, like long time. He would be urinating,
Yeah.
wetting the bed. He wasn't gaining any weight. He just seemed really lethargic. He was just on the couch all the time. He was really tiny, which we didn't think much of because if you're watching the video portion, you see like his old man. I'm not necessarily big, so we didn't think too much of it. But finally, we were kind of to the point where we thought something's not right. Well, he's got his 4-year-old checkup. So we thought, okay, we'll just bring it up. Because, whenever you have your annual checkup with your kid, doctor's asking any questions. Do you notice anything? Any questions for us? We said, well, yeah, we mention all these things, which are the telltale signs. Frequent urination, drinking water just constantly, feels like he couldn't have enough water.
Yeah.
Lethargic, not gaining weight, and they were just kind of like, no, he checks out. He's still everything's okay, and send us along on our way. And
Really?
this was at his 4-year-old checkup,
Okay.
where if they would have just checked his blood sugar or checked his urine and see the sugar that's in there, they would have known immediately.
Wow.
So this kind of goes back to what you discussed in your first podcast. Like it, you have to be an advocate yourself. Like you have to push. If you notice something's wrong, you got to keep pushing because you're probably right. You know your body better than anybody else. So to Grace's credit, she had, and she gives all the credit to God. She really does because a few weeks prior, there's this nonprofit, Kisses for Kaisi. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but basically, this is a young girl who died because she wasn't diagnosed in time, and her parents started a nonprofit just for advocacy of making people aware of the symptoms,
Yeah.
right? Because they wanted nobody to go through what they had gone through, and so they have this whole social media campaign where they make people aware of these symptoms, and she had just so happened to see one of these Instagram posts that had this sweet girl's picture and had this symptoms, and they all, we could have checked the box on every single one of them for
Yeah.
David. And she just connected the dots and was like, David fits that.
Yeah.
Like all these things that fits David. And she called back, God, 2 days after David's 4-year-old checkup and said, or I don't know, it might have been a few weeks. Either way, something is wrong. I think it's type 1, and I want y'all to check them. And they said, okay, we'll set an appointment for the next day.
Okay.
Which, looking back, I'm like, we should have fought. We didn't know how serious this was,
Right.
or how like
Yeah.
you need insulin now. You need insulin yesterday.
Yeah.
Like we got to get this diagnosis quick.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm still a little hurt that they were like, just we'll schedule an appointment tomorrow. And so we went, and they checked his urine. Sure enough, there was sugar, and the doctor, the pediatrician said, "Pack your bags. You're going to Cook's Children's in Fort Worth, and you're going to be there for the weekend." And we still had no idea. What does that mean? We're so ignorant as to what that meant.
Yeah.
No idea. So she calls me. I'm at work. I come home, pack my bag, and we head to Cook's, and we go directly to the emergency room, and they call us back and they check his blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget that nurse in the ER when she sees on the meter, and she sees it, and I think it was in the 600s at that point,
Okay.
which to us meant nothing.
Yeah.
We had no idea what
I
that
know.
meant.
To a lot of
He might
people.
have been a trillion. We don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Um, but for a normal person whose range is probably between 80 and 120, 600 is far from that range. So
Right.
we didn't know that at the time. And I'll just never forget that nurse's look. Who's in the emergency room. And like as soon as she saw the number, her face sank and she was sullen and she was like sad. And I thought, that's not good because she is an emergency room nurse at Cook's who probably sees everything. And when she had that look on her face, and I just, my heart sank, and I just, the worry set in, like, what is happening? What is this? And I'll never forget, she said something, she goes, it's gonna be okay. And she said immediately, and I know she was just trying to help, and I get that now, but she said, there are camps for kids like him. And I'm like, camps? What? And I can't say what was going through my head because I don't want your podcast to have an exquisite.
I can figure out
It's-
for you to beat. That'd be fun.
That's okay. I won't make you beep it. But I remember thinking, what are you talking about, lady? All I heard her say was, your kid is different. Your kid, everything, the goals and the dreams that you have had for your kid, that's going to be different. Throw those out the window. And he just now has this camp that's for special, different kids like him. That's all I heard.
Yeah, I can totally understand that.
I was so angry. I was so upset. I was so confused. You name it. But when and I know she meant well, and that's totally fine. But at the time, that's all I heard was, your kid is now different, and whatever hopes and dreams you had for him, put those out of the window because you have a completely different life ahead of you than what you originally thought.
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, the way you've seen him the last couple weeks, months, with the lethargy and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that could have been, all you knew, and that's all that was going to be. I mean, because like you, I had no idea what type. I knew of type 1. I had a friend who had an insulin pump that we worked together, and that's about it. I knew it would beep from time to time and give him insulin, and that was the extent of my knowledge. So,
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea. The people in my life who had type 1, I didn't really even know what that meant.
yeah,
I had no idea. Um, so yeah, there we are at Cook's, and then we get sent up and we get a room, and then they start going through the whole thing, like you discussed, that whole whirlwind you go through once you go through the initial diagnosis, where they're teaching you diabetes 101. Here's what it is. Here's how to check your blood sugar. Here's how to give insulin. We're putting the needle into an orange and practicing giving shots into the orange.
yeah,
And then 3 days later, you're off. Here you go. Go home with a bunch of needles and a bunch of new stuff. And here we are chasing a 4-year-old across the house to pin him down to give him shots to check his blood sugar. And we're setting 2 or 3 alarms on our phone at night to wake up in the middle of the night to prick his finger to check his blood sugar. And it's like having a newborn all over again. And at the time, you're thinking, we have a newborn who's never going to grow up. Like, we're always going to be waking up in the middle of the night, and we're always going to be worried, and we're always going to be checking him 24/7. And it was a whirlwind for sure. It was rough. It
yeah. And
was
I mean,
rough.
as a 4-year-old, I mean, we're getting to the point now where Bryson can ask, like, tell us, I want this song, or I want this snack, or I want water. And so, I mean, a 4-year-old, he had no idea what was going
Oh
on. I
my
mean,
gosh,
just,
we barely had any
yeah.
idea what was going on,
So
much less him.
I'm sure he just saw, well, I have a little kit, with the glucose monitor, the strips, all that stuff. And so I'm sure when he saw that come out, it was just like, I know it's coming in, and I don't want any part of it, because
Yeah,
he just has no understanding of why or what's going on. And
when you're a little kid, part of your biggest goal in life is to avoid shots.
yeah,
And
that's
then
true.
now you're diagnosed at 4 years old, and you're like, oh, by the way, you're going to get about 8 to 12 needles a day, depending on how often you're going to eat, or what activity you're doing, or you're
Yeah,
running around, or
or
whatever.
if you're sick or not, and your numbers are stubborn.
Yeah, so you go from worrying about maybe one shot a year to about 12 a day, and it was rough for sure. And we had a 6-year old as well, and then we also had a 2-year old too. And then now we're trying to figure out type 1 and how
Yeah,
to help a kid with a chronic illness now and help him navigate that. So I mean, it probably took me a year and a half to 2 years where I could even talk about his diagnosis story without crying. I
no,
mean, it was a long 2 years for sure. Um, and that's something that I would tell folks too, is it to try, and that's why I appreciate what you're doing here with Rebel Health, is having a community to go to with folks who get it is so huge, because you don't know unless you're in it. right? You don't know unless you're living it every day. And so you have all these folks in your community who are great and well-meaning and they love you and they want to help you out, but unless you know, you just don't know.
Right.
And so finding a group that are in it with you can be such a big factor in your success. And so that's why I think what you're doing is pretty cool. And I hope people get involved and find that community through it.
Well, I appreciate it. And I mean, the community and the support group's a huge part in it. It really doesn't even have to be the same chronic illness or anything like that. Because I first thought about just doing strictly type 1 stuff. And then, I have some other friends with other autoimmune issues, and, the struggle's the same. It may not be multiple shots a day, but it's doing, no gluten, no dairy, no, anything like that. And so, there's community in just the struggle alone.
Yeah.
So you guys did the multiple daily injections for about how long?
So I think he was on multiple daily injections for about a year. Uh,
And did they make you do anything? Like, was there a timeline to get on like a CGM or a pump or anything like that? Did you have to?
there was a timeline for a pump, yes. I think for a
Okay,
pump, they wanted you to get used to daily injections for about 6 months.
okay,
So they had a timeline on the pump, but once they sent us home, that's when I really started doing a lot of research on my own, right? And you kind of you talked about this in the first episode, and then you and I have had conversations about it as well. There's just so much, and they just give you the basics, right? They want to give you the basics so you understand what type 1 is and how you can live with it, right? They don't have enough time to give you an in-depth look at all the options and what that looks like and what works best for you. So a lot of it you have to do your own research and you have to do your own looking into and figure out what's going to work best. So once we got home, man, I was all in on doing as much research as I could, but listening to podcasts, reading online, I mean, you name it, wanted to become a type 1 guru and know all that I could so I can help him have the best life he could, right? I mean, right from the beginning, my biggest fear was him being different and him having a different life than what we anticipated. And so I wanted to learn as much as I could to figure out how to help him have the most normal life and look just like his buddies and do all the things he wanted to do to have a normal childhood
yeah,
and a healthy childhood. So doing all this research and learning about it, I first learned about a CGM, which I don't remember, and they might have told us about this, but this would have been what, in 2016 when he was diagnosed. So this was back when Dexcom was the G5 or G4, something like that around then.
yeah,
Uh, and I remember reading about these continuous glucose monitors, and I thought, oh my gosh, we got to get one of those as soon as possible because we're so tired of checking his numbers with the meter
yeah,
and not knowing, okay, that's great, that's where you're at right now, but where are you headed? Where are you going? What have you been at? Man, as soon as I learned about Dexcom, I was like, we have to get that as soon as possible. So we were only checking with the glucose meter for probably a month, and then we got him on the Dexcom.
oh wow,
And I'm hearing now that a lot of people, when you're first diagnosed, they'll send you home with a Dexcom.
really?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
we talked to a lot of people in the community who are just now being diagnosed, or their kids just now being diagnosed, and thankfully they'll leave the hospital with a Dexcom,
that's such a big,
which is awesome. I'm so thankful for that. Because without, I can't imagine life without it. That's the one piece of technology that, holy cow, we could live without a pump. I would rather not, but without a glucose monitor, oh my gosh,
yeah. And
cannot imagine.
for those listening, so there's really two ways that you can track your numbers. One is kind of the old school way, back in the day where you had to prick your finger, you put it on a little blood sample card, and it goes into a meter and it spits out your number. And that's like a right here, right now check in time. So you don't, if you want to check your numbers every hour, you have to prick your finger every hour, get that reading out, and it was a lot of people use like a paper log. It was like a journal.
Oh,
They'd
absolutely.
put
We had to
the date
turn
and the
the
time.
logs in.
Yeah.
Like when
So
we would go in, because at first after diagnosis you would have to go, I can't
like
remember,
a
once a week, once a month,
yeah,
and you would have to turn those logs in.
yeah, and so you could dial in your insulin and all that stuff, and
Yeah, and the negative part about that, like you were saying, is it just tells you where your blood glucose is at that point in time, right then and there. You don't know, okay, well, am I falling quickly? Am I rising? Am I
have I been
where have I
high
been?
for
Right.
4 hours, and if you eat, a couple Skittles or just a big steak or something, the protein is hits way different than the carbs do. So like the protein is going to spike you slower but more gradually over time
Yeah,
for longer. And if you check at one point, it could be 120, which is all right, that's not bad. And then
sure.
a couple hours later, it's 160 or something. But so there, and then there's continuous glucose monitors, which is what I have on my arm right here that connects to either your phone or a PDA, kind of like an old, PDA back in the day, and it gives you results every 5 minutes. So you can see a trajectory of where you're going. Are you steadily going up and need to do some insulin? Are you dropping because you've been out on a walk or something? And you can set different alarms for if you're dropping quickly, it'll alarm you before you go too low, and same thing for going high. So I'm with you there. I mean, I could go back to the manual injections, but I couldn't go without my Dexcom.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So we sound like a Dexcom ad.
Yeah, I
Maybe
know.
you're gonna get
I mean,
sponsored right here.
if anyone from Dexcom's listening, I would take free Dexcoms for life. That'd
No
be okay.
doubt. Heck yeah.
We'll hook
And you
Trevor up
got to
too.
show your
Yeah,
tricep a little bit there. Nice on the video. Well played.
that's why I wanted to
Well
miss that
done.
actually.
Well
Um,
done.
so I guess going into that a little bit more, I know that have, you're like me and you geek out on the latest technology. We've talked about pumps, the new CGMs coming out, but one thing that you've been able to do that I haven't been able to wrap my mind around is looping and just that whole process of, you know, not waiting and taking really health into your own hands. Can you give us just the dumbest down version of what the technology was at the time and what loop is and how it brought things together and how much more useful and better that made the pump and the CGM.
Yeah, absolutely. That so when he was first diagnosed, uh, we were doing shots at first, and then we looked into getting into an insulin pump. And there were only three insulin pumps on the market at the time. Two of them uh, had tubes. So basically, you would have a site on you, which would have the cannula that would put the insulin inside your body, and a tube that would connect to your pump. Yeah, you got one right there. Uh, but for us, like we have a 4-year-old who's running around, wrestling around. He's going nuts. The idea of having a tubed pump that he would get caught on, any little toy or whatever and get ripped out, and the fact that those suckers are not cheap.
Yeah.
Those things are like 7 grand, something crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't want a 4-year-old to have, a 7,000 piece technology that he's just gonna wreck and get, and lose or get trashed or something. So we didn't want a pump that was going to have a tube. So on the one of the pump options was an Omnipod, which was a tubeless pump. So the advantage there is that you just every 3 days you put on a brand new pump, and that's it. You throw it away after 3 days. It's got the cannula that goes right inside, and I should have brought one, but that so we decided to go with the Omnipod route. But at the time, the pump and your monitor, they weren't speaking to one another. So it's like with you would basically have to check your blood sugar. You could look at the Dexcom, which would tell you where your insulin was and where you were going, if you were trending up or you were trending down. But there was no way for that information to feed to your insulin pump. So if you were going high, there wasn't a way for your insulin pump to automatically give you some more insulin to even you out or bring you down. Or the alternative, if you were going low and your blood sugar was going low, there wasn't a way to shut off the insulin pump and to stop from giving you insulin,
Right.
right? Um, so they weren't communicating to each other. Now, there was one of the tubes, the Medtronic pump at the time, did have that technology, But again, it was a tube pump, so we didn't want to have that.
Yeah, understood.
Uh, and man, I wanted to have a closed loop system. I wanted the two to talk to each other because it would make our lives so much easier because it would stop the highs before he got too high and it would stop insulin if he was going too low. That way, if he was going to bottom out, it would shorten the length that he was low,
Right.
or stop him from going low altogether. So I didn't want a tube pump, but I wanted him to be on a closed loop system. And at the time, there really wasn't an option. But after doing a lot of geeking out and listening to podcasts and to reading online, I found that there was this group of people who had essentially hacked into insulin pumps to make a closed loop system.
And
Be
for all those like millennials, it's basically jailbreaking. Like if you ever jailbroke your iPhone back in the day, you jailbroke an insulin pump.
They jailbroke, and they had jailbroke these old Medtronic pumps. Those were the first ones that they had
Okay.
jailbroke. And the advantage of doing that versus the new Medtronics was twofold. It was cheaper, right? You could buy these old insulin pumps, from somebody online. So it was a cheaper option, and the app that they created was completely customizable. So you could set your own range and you could set, I want to be between 80 and 90 is my range versus the pumps that were out there, it was a set thing. Like there
Default
was no
one and the same for
customization,
everybody.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but the only way you could create this app, and you could create it on your iPhone, but what you had to do is at the time you had to have a MacBook and you had to have this software on the MacBook, Xcode is the name of it, to help build an app. So you actually had to build the app on your own phone that would allow you to hack into your insulin pump.
And
Um,
you did go to school for software engineering, right?
no, I knew none of that. But these amazing people, genius people, Pete Schwab, Katie DeSimone, they are on my Mount Rushmore of diabetes, right with Banting himself, who created insulin. Like these folks, I think so highly of these folks because these folks were parents of type 1 diabetics who wanted a better way. They wanted to utilize the technology that was out there so that their kid could have an easier and better and healthier life. And so, man, not only did they hack into these pumps, but they also created an app and an algorithm that would run the pump based off the information that they were getting from the monitor. So, like we said, if you're going high, it would tell the pump to give you a little bit more insulin, change your basal rates and how much insulin you're getting every 5 minutes. And it was awesome. So, but what you had to do was buy a MacBook. They had this website because it was open source where it would walk you through how to build the app through Xcode and connect an iPhone to your computer and build the app on your phone. Which I had no idea, and their ability to dumb it down to where somebody like me could build an app on a phone, it was awesome. And not only that, you had to also buy this thing because at the time it was just an old Medtronic pump. That was the only one that you could utilize. Well, then they were in the process of wanting to hack into the Omnipod, which is the tubeless one, which is what David had.
Okay.
And so I would actually send them pods so they could test it out, right?
Oh
And
wow.
and continue testing it and making sure that they could hack into that Omnipod. And so they finally released it for Omnipod, and I was so excited. So we built the app. You also had to buy this thing that they called a Riley link. It was called a Riley link after Pete's daughter who had type 1.
Oh,
Her name
cool.
was Riley. And so you would buy this thing that was essentially an antenna and a computer chip thing. This is very technical right here. And what it would do, it would allow, because your CGM speaks through Bluetooth, but the pump no, I'm sorry. Yeah, the pump spoke through radio frequencies. So the Riley link, you had to have this third piece of technology that would allow them to speak to both,
Right.
right? It would kind of convert and be able to speak and give commands to your pod, which spoke through the radio, and then the CGM that would speak through Bluetooth. Um, Now you don't have to have that, which is way better. But so we bought that. We bought an iPhone for David, which we already had because we was reading the glucose monitor. And there we go. We were looping, and I was a little nervous because, this isn't, it's not FDA approved. You are building an app like
The
online.
epitome of owning your health. Like
Oh my gosh,
you're
yeah.
all on yourself.
And that's why, you talked about in your first podcast about how you had to own your health and what you had to do to navigate the healthcare system to take ownership of your own health and live a healthier and better life. And that's what these people were doing big time.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
to the
they're
point that
amazing.
they are hacking into these things and putting and creating these websites to walk others through it too. Because these people are geniuses.
Yeah,
I mean,
they really are impressive.
oh my gosh, amazing. And then to walk dummies like me through it and to help me be able to do it for my kid, man, I just think so highly of these folks and what they've done and what they've accomplished. I mean, you talk about rebels, dude, they were rebels in building all this stuff.
Oh yeah.
So it was really cool. So that's how we got into looping, and we've been looping ever since. I guess that was probably 2018 when they released it for Omnipod.
And were you on, how long were you on the pod and the CGM when they were not looping and communicating together? Was it very long, or did you get right into the looping?
It was probably a year
Okay.
until they,
Did you notice a big difference from when they were manually, like you're taking the CGM inputs and, manually correcting the pump? And during that time, I'm sure you're still waking up at night. At least then you're just checking your phone
yeah.
to see what his numbers are and then, giving a bolus as needed. But could you tell a difference in the loop versus the two independently acting?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the biggest difference was going to be nighttime. We went from, waking up, golly, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 times a week in the middle of the night to help give him some sugar or give him some additional insulin to now we've got it tuned into where we almost never have to get up in
Yeah.
the middle of the night. And he just coasts and it keeps him relatively within range throughout the night.
Almost unless he's like sneaking into the pantry and getting into the Skittles or
That's
something
true.
like that. And
And then it's pretty obvious
yeah,
when that would happen.
big old straight up.
So man, the night times we can sleep again, which is fantastic. And then yeah, it's a smoother ride. Like if you're looking at his blood sugar and his charts and how his blood sugar, it's much smoother and it's a lot less manual taking care of him on our part, right? There's a lot fewer times where we're having to go in and give him more insulin or it stops a ton of lows. He might have been having lows all the time versus now it's just,
There's a child that young, just
oh my gosh, running
you
around
go
and
from sitting on the couch watching TV to being outside for 4 hours, and
absolutely. So it's helped tremendously. I could never go back for sure.
well, I think it's just incredible that you took that step. And I mean, like you mentioned, I mean, you're owning it at that point. It's not something you download from the App Store. It's something that you build and you're putting the inputs into. And I think that's so cool. I mean, like you mentioned, that team that put that together and just open sourced it to the world. I mean, that's what it's all about. I mean, taking care of those who
Man.
need it and can't afford the $7,000 pumps, but still have kids and family members and themselves even that they're trying to make their health better. So
It is awesome, man, and it's still out there. You can build. It's a lot easier to build the app now. You don't have to have a MacBook. They've got it to where you can just build it with any web browser. So it's gotten way easier from back then to where you have to have a MacBook, you have to have Xcode, you have to build the app. It's gotten way easier. And that community alone, because they don't get paid, they don't,
yeah,
they don't, they spend countless hours helping people online do this and build this for their kids, and it's such a cool community. And
yeah,
we would have somebody who lived right, not, pretty close to you who would come over once a year to rebuild their app at our house for their daughter. And it's just a cool community who want to take charge and take care of their take care of their kid. And
yeah.
those people are pretty amazing.
Their tagline, which is "We're not waiting" or "We won't wait."
Yeah, we are not
You're
waiting
not waiting.
was their hashtag. Uh, because they weren't waiting for the tech companies to put all of it together and make it available to folks. And they did. They hacked into it and made it available. It was really cool.
Yeah, because I mean, even today, the Omnipod, I think now you can, but even recently, the Omnipod 5, the newest one, you had to have one of those little PDMs. You couldn't use your phone, right?
Yeah.
But with the Loop, you can do it all from your phone,
Yeah, it's
right? Okay.
all through
So
your phone.
I mean, they're still steps ahead of some of the huge
Yeah.
names in the insulin care industry. So
Yeah.
it's I'll make sure to put some of the links to their organization and their details in the podcast
Yep.
for anybody who is interested in learning more about that group or, could use them as a resource.
Yeah,
So,
and it's not just like they have the Loop and then they have Night Scout as well, which Night Scout's a way to remotely monitor your kid's blood sugar and your pump as well. Because with the CGM, you have the ability to see their numbers. Night Scout, you also have the ability to monitor their pump and what's been going on with their pump and their basal rate. And you can monitor loop and how it's been changing, right? Did it give them extra insulin? Did it not? Did it stop their basal rate? Did it stop giving them insulin to prevent a low? So you get the ability to monitor not only their numbers, but also the insulin pump. And I can see like if he's at school, okay, he had lunch, but did he give himself insulin? Did he, I can monitor those things. And even to the point where if I see he's going high and I know that he's at school and I'm at work, I can't give him insulin, but I can say, hey, I want that pump to think he needs 130% of his normal basal rate right now. So it's going to increase his basal rate and think he needs more insulin right now. I can
wow.
tell his pump to do that from work. I could do it right here, sitting right here.
I didn't know it had that
So you have the ability, you
capability.
can even remote bolus. Now I haven't figured that piece
Yeah.
out, but I know you have the ability to do that. So you've got a lot of cool, and again, all built by either type 1 diabetics or parents of type 1 diabetics who wanted a better way to monitor and help their kids out.
Yeah, because I mean, if you don't have that ability, you're relying on a young child to remember, hey, I need to do insulin before I eat. I need to eat, an hour, hour and a half after I eat. I need to check my numbers, give insulin again if I
Yeah,
need to, or rely on their teacher or their nurse. And, they have 20 other kids in the classroom,
yeah,
I'm sure they would give it their best, but people
right.
are going to forget. And that's awesome that it gives you the ability to do that.
Yeah,
So.
it's pretty cool.
All right, well, thank you for that rundown.
Yeah,
I learned things even that I thought I knew that I didn't. So
yeah,
very cool
absolutely.
there. Um, Next, kind of wanted to get into, I guess, some of like the day-to-day struggles. I mean, it sounds like things are a lot smoother now with some of the tech integration and all of that, but I mean, still, he's so young, so active. He does football still.
Yeah,
Yeah,
flag
so I
football,
mean,
plays
like,
basketball, very sporty,
do
loves
you
athletics.
do you feel like he's been impacted like when you thought he was going to be special and go into a camp, or do you think he lives pretty much a normal life for the most part?
Yeah, for the most part, he lives a completely normal life, which was the goal. I mean, when he was first diagnosed, that when that lady said that, I kind of mentioned that was my biggest fear. I was like, he's going to be different, and he's not going to have a normal childhood that I had thought he was going to have. Uh, but while we were there at the hospital, I mean, that was a dark period, so dark period, especially at the hospital while we're trying to learn this and we're soaking it all in. One of the nurses there who was coming in, and checking every few hours, thankfully was a type 1 diabetic, and he was probably in his late 20s, maybe, young
Okay,
guy.
cool.
And he would come in and man, he gave us such hope because we're like, look, here's a normal guy who's just because
Got
we're just so good. We don't know what the heck's
got a
going
good
on.
job and
Yeah, he's just a normal dude who I would have no idea has this thing that my kid now has. And he was so good. I mean, he would just put his arms around my wife and I, and we're just crying. He's like, "It's gonna be fine. He's gonna be great." Uh, and my whole goal after we left the hospital and I started listening to podcasts and started reading up on this was just that. I want him to have his normal life and be healthy and to where nobody else views him as different and he doesn't view himself as different and he feels motivated that he can do anything. And man, I was hardcore about it from the get-go. To the point where when you're first diagnosed, you can't believe that this thing is out there and people don't know about type 1.
yeah,
You were shocked. You're like, this is a thing that millions of people have. what is it, close to 2 million in the United States alone.
Yeah.
And you're like, how does no one know about this? Everyone needs to know. This thing is crazy. How do
Yeah.
people not know what type 1 is? And how can people not understand what we're going through right now? You feel like alone, you feel shocked, and you feel like I took it as I want people to know that this is out there. One, so they can be aware of the symptoms and make sure that their kid's healthy and diagnose it when they need to.
Right.
Uh, and then two, selfishly, I just wanted them to know because I wanted them to have the knowledge so they didn't view David as different or strange or
Yeah. And
because I always felt like when he was going to hang out with friends or go to a buddy's house, like my fear was that other parents wouldn't have him over for a play date.
kind of like a I hate to say it, but like a liability in a sense, just like a
100%.
I don't know how to care for that. Like I don't want something to go wrong, and nothing against them because
Not at
honestly,
all.
it would cross my mind too if I didn't have
Absolutely.
experience. I
Yes.
totally understand that. So
Absolutely. My biggest fear was that other parents weren't going to have him over for play dates or view him as different or not want to have him over. So I went extreme. I'm like, I'm going to make sure other people, our community knows he has this and that they know what it is and that they're not afraid of it and that we're all good and that they will know what type 1 is and they'll have him over, right? So I was like, we're gonna go all out. So I had saw this thing on the through online. There was this woman in Florida who her daughter had type 1 as well, and they did a mini golf tournament every year to raise money for JDRF, the foundation that raises money for type 1. And her name was Maeve. Her kid was named Maeve, and she had a Brave Maeve mini golf tournament. And the Today Show actually did a segment on it, right? And so they did a segment on Type 1. It's a great segment out on YouTube, Brave Maeve, Type 1. And this family, I watched it and I was just tearing up and crying because they were living the life that I was living too. I'm like, man, this hits home like crazy. And it was a great segment that talked about living with a kid with Type 1, and she had this great mini golf tournament that they did. And I thought, well, Brave Maeve, Brave Dave, let's do it. So we're going to do a mini golf tournament. And at every hole, I'm going to invite all his friends, everybody in the community, and we'll do this fundraiser for JDRF. But I didn't care if we raised a dime. That organization raises millions and millions of dollars every year. We were going to raise $400. It wasn't about that. The whole purpose of it, selfishly, was I wanted people to come and learn about type 1 so they would have my kid over
yeah,
and and have him over for play dates and not view him as different. And I wanted him to feel loved as well. And I
right.
wanted him to feel like, okay, we're taking this thing on head on.
We got
Let's go.
support, and my friends are still going to be there, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I wanted him to view us as fighting it with all we had and not scared of it, and we're gonna push through to try and energize him as well, to hopefully set a foundation for him as he grows up to have an attitude like you do with it. Like, I'm going to take charge of this and fight for my health. And so we had the Brave Dave mini golf tournament. We had family and friends come, and at every hole, I would put up facts about type 1, and here's what it is, and here's how we take care of David. And man, that was in my mind, was the whole purpose. Was I just wanted the community to know about what he's going through, what type 1 is, so they wouldn't. I was just fearful that he would be different, and I thought this was a way to push where they would know what it is and have him over for a play date.
Yeah,
Like that,
no,
because
that's
that's what going through my mind is: are other parents gonna? My kid comes with instructions.
yeah.
Are they gonna be willing to do that, and have him over? And so,
I mean, one, that's just awesome that you took that route. I remember you putting that on Facebook, and I remember the flyer, and I mean, I can picture it in my head from
it's
you
funny.
put it out there and stuff. And I mean, it's awesome that not only did you just say, okay, we're gonna treat and take care of him, but we're gonna go above and beyond. Like, we're gonna do everything we can for him to have as normal as a life as possible. And I honestly, I'd never even thought of that. For someone that has a child with type 1 or any other condition, disease, anything like that, going over to a friend's house and having a sleepover, like that's a huge deal. I mean, for you, for him, for the parents that he's going over to, I mean, that's a big deal. And I never even considered that. I mean, there's so much that I'm sure goes on in your head that for me, I'm just trying to keep myself alive. But you're not only trying to keep David alive, but you're trying to make sure that he's normal and everybody views him as normal. And I guess more importantly, he views himself as normal,
Right.
not some bionic machine with things attached to him that beep all the time. So,
Right.
but you also were spreading awareness, kind of like your wife, where she just happened to scroll by something on Instagram. Now, this huge group that, support him and you guys and your family, but now they know all these things. So, you take those, I don't know, however many people were there, but now their whole network knows. Somebody put something on Facebook, hey, my kid has these symptoms. From your 18-hole golf, putt-putt thing, they know 18 facts about type 1 now. So that's really cool. And I know that, was kind of like probably a second goal, but I mean, I think you probably accomplished so much more than you realized in that event. So,
Yeah, and we try to every November when it's type 1 month post. I don't post a lot on social media, but usually it's around that time of year just posting the symptoms again to make sure people are aware and that they know. And their elementary school even let me come to the school and go to all the classrooms and talk about type 1 and symptoms to the students in every class, which was great because again I just wanted to do everything I could to show David that we loved and we supported him and that we were going to fight, fight for him with all we got. And then also just to make folks aware of what it was because, if it wasn't for that Instagram post that my wife saw, he may not be here
yeah,
and flat out.
it's a
I mean,
serious reality that he could,
he had his 4-year-old checkup a few days before, and then we just were sent home. So,
after literally voicing concerns,
right.
which were the checklist for type 1 diabetes. I mean,
It
you,
followed the pattern
there's
immediately.
not a better place that you could have voiced your
I know.
concerns. So, I mean,
And you talk about, you know, with what you have going on with Rebel Health about advocating for yourself and taking ownership of your health. And I remember when we went to the endocrinologist, this was probably when he was 5 or so. We were probably, or this might have been he was just a few months into diagnosis, and we were going skiing. And we had told to Trail West where you went
oh, yeah.
skiing with us, yeah.
Yep.
So we were going skiing there, and we asked the endocrinologist, what should we be aware of? What should we be thinking about taking a 5-year-old type 1 skiing? Because we had made the decision early on, we're going to do everything. We're going to do everything. We're not going to be afraid of this and let it hold us back. And so we're going skiing with a 5-year-old type 1 diabetic. What should we be aware of? What should we know? And the endocrinologist said, hey, where are you going? And we're like, we're skiing up at Monarch in Colorado. He goes, well, you might want to look at and find all the hospitals along the route that you're going there. And just so you know, you need to go in, if you happen to need to go into a hospital, you need to know you're going to know more about type 1 than any of the staff at those hospitals. So you're going to have to educate them and fight for your son there. And that like blew my mind because up until this point, having relatively good health myself and our kids, we just kind of assumed that health professionals they knew everything
Mm,
and they know everything, and if something's wrong you just go tell them what's wrong and boom, you're good. So having him tell us that, hey, any hospitals between here and Colorado, you're going to know more about this thing that your son has than the hospitals do. And that was so eye-opening to me and just even pushed me even further to realize like we have to take ownership of this ourselves, that we have to be advocates for ourselves and as knowledgeable as we can be. And health professionals, they're great and they're there to help and they can, but I can't just rely on them and view that as the end all be all.
right. I mean, and especially with today, everything that's out there today. I mean, I just don't think they can be well versed enough to cover everything.
No,
There's so many just different conditions and things that are popping up, mental health issues, autoimmune stuff, cancers, and it, I mean, it's unfair to ask them to be able to know everything, but at the same time, yeah, I mean, you've got to be able to advocate for yourself. And if you go in and it sounds like they're going to give you, 20 units of insulin when you normally only do 10. Like you got to be say no, like I refuse. Like you're
Right.
not doing that. I mean, that may be their care plan, but it's your body. You put your foot down where you need to.
And that's something I was so thankful for. We've been really lucky with his endocrinologist that they were open to loop and open to these types of
That
things.
was a question I was going to ask is did you have any pushback from them on that?
Thankfully, no. And I was really worried about that because, again, it's not like it's FDA approved, and we're built an app on my son's phone, that we pulled from the internet. Like on the outside, it sounds crazy, but thankfully, he had known enough to be dangerous and had heard about it and had seen the results and had seen, our Dexcom charts that we provided him and kind of walked him through that. Thankfully, he was really open to it. So we were really lucky to have a healthcare team that was open to that and listening. And now we had to know our stuff and show the results to him.
Definitely.
But once he kind of saw that, really open to it and hearing about it and talking about how it works. So
And
yeah, luckily
seeing
we had
the
that.
results that you guys had, having him been on loop for a while and seeing that it was working, making life easier, better control of his numbers, more freedom for you guys with the other kids, your work, and then, just him as well. What would have happened if the doctor would have been like, I'm not prescribing you any insulin unless you stop using this? Like,
Man.
where would you have gone from there?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. That's tough because we're in the Cook's network. You're kind of stuck, because you have the advantage of the nice thing about being with Cooks is you have the advantage of having if something were to go wrong or you needed that help. There's nothing better than Cooks. I mean, they're huge, they're great. It's a massive network all across Dallas Fort Worth. So to lose access to that would have been really tough. But at the same time, if we were having successful results, maybe we look into to finding I can't. That's got to be really hard to have your medical professional team and you be on not on the same page. I don't know how you could move forward with that.
Yeah,
So we probably would have tried to find somebody else at that point.
it's
I'm really glad we didn't have to go down there.
Yeah, I am too. I was wondering if you would have had any pushback, but I'm really glad you didn't because I faced some like with my pump. I was doing really well when I first got diagnosed with the manual injections and everything.
Yeah,
And my doctor's like, you don't need a pump. He's just like, you're doing so good now. Why do you want to change it? And for all the reasons that you mentioned, where, we just had our son. I can't tell you how many times we left the house, diaper bag, bottle, this, that, the other, car keys, phone. I forget my insulin. I mean, there
yeah,
must have been 50 times in that first 6 months that we'd go out to eat, we'd drive to Dallas, we'd go wherever, and I'd order food and be like, don't have any insulin. So,
yeah,
do I either eat it and be super high for the rest of the day or just not eat it?
yeah.
And so, I had reasons where like, no, I need a pump. Like, that's what I want. It's, out there for me to use. And so I had to find a different doctor
Wow,
straight up.
that's
Like I
crazy.
wasn't gonna let him be the road barrier of
Yeah.
getting the latest tech that's out there. So I'm glad you guys didn't face that though.
Oh
That's
man, I'm so thankful too. That'd have been rough. That would have been rough.
well, we are. I can't tell how far we are, but we've been talking a good bit. I want to make sure that you are able to talk to others about, type 1, just because I agree. I want to spread awareness and like put the symptoms out there and stuff. So I'm definitely going to put some links in there. But, for just parents in general that are dealing with, someone or a child that has type 1 or a different autoimmune issue, disease, just conditions, stuff like that, just what are some of the biggest tips that you've learned, and it doesn't have to be, factual and data, but as a dad, something, do you have anything like that? I mean, I know you just went through an experience with CPS, if you want to talk on that at all.
Well, yeah, that was we with type 1, you have to have quarterly uh, appointments with your endocrinologist. And I was telling Josh how the endocrinologist had to cancel one of those appointments and we had trouble rescheduling. So we just pushed it back and we were going to meet with the next quarter and not thinking anything of it because it was the hospital that said, hey, we can't do this. meeting. Like we can't do this appointment, so we got to reschedule. So not that we're like, great, we'll just push it back to the next. Well, then we got a call from CPS saying, hey, you didn't have this appointment. We had to call and check in because you have to have these every quarter. We're like, hang on, that was the hospital, not us who canceled that appointment. Like we tried to reschedule, and it was all good, and everything was okay. But as far as advice or things for parents, um, that's a good question. I think for David, we're always having these conversations, my wife and I, about how to take care of him and also educate him so he can take care of himself, right? So it's a constant conversation around which you are doing with any kid regardless, right? Of how do we when they're young and we got to take care of everything, how do we help them grow into where they can fix their own lunch
Yep.
or fix their own, whatever, pack their own, do their own homework. And you're constantly having that conversation of growing them from a child to an adult and teaching them responsibility and taking care of them things. And so type 1 just adds a completely extra layer to that, right? And it's this constant conversation, and I can't imagine not having a partnership with my wife. And we saw early on when he was first diagnosed and we started looking, the divorce rates among parents with children with a chronic illness are much higher than those parents without a child with chronic illness.
Wow. I That's another thing that never crossed my mind before.
Yeah, it
And I
is
can
much higher.
totally, I mean, that's a lot to take on. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I can see how, financially, I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. So,
there's a lot. And so we read about that really early on. In fact, it was while we were in the hospital. Because when you're in the hospital, you got nothing else to do. So we're just doing all this reading. And we had read that, yeah, divorce rates are much higher for kids with chronic illness. So we had to I mean, I remember us having the conversation right there in the hospital. Hey, we know that that danger is out there. We don't want that. We got to keep such an open line of communication and a partnership and making decisions on how to take care of him and be on the same page, which is not easy to do because there's oftentimes I'm very controlling and I want him to have the best numbers possible. And if he's high for a long period of time, I almost take it personal. And I know I shouldn't, but I do. And I'm like, we got to fight this. We got to keep him. And Grace is different in that regards to where she's like, it's okay. It's fine. And we can kind of butt heads and have differences of opinions. And I'm good for her in that regards. And she's good for me in that regards. And so we had
balance each other out a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. So we had to make sure that we keep an open line of communication with each other because without it, it could go awry really quickly. And then other than that, we're just trying to find that balance between taking care of it. That's what's hard about where he's at right now because he's 11 and he's really smart and he knows about type 1. He really doesn't remember life without it. So he's smart and he does a great job of taking care of himself, but he's also 11. So we have that battle of we just want him to be a kid and we don't want to throw it all on him right now.
Yeah.
We want him to be able to be a kid and be carefree at times, but we also want him to know he has to take responsibility of himself and take care of himself because it's a 24-hour management there. So finding that balance of letting him be a kid and carefree versus teaching him to take the responsibility and make sure he's taking care of himself. We have not perfected that, but that's what we're going through right now and trying to let him take care of it more.
Well, I'm 30 and I still have mornings where I'll have, a blockage in my pump and I'll just mute it for another hour of sleep. So
Yeah,
I can only imagine trying to get an 11-year-old to, be perfect and take ownership of it. So
yeah,
I think it's awesome that you guys are giving him some ownership. I mean, I think I would struggle, because insulin's one of those things where you need it,
yeah,
but if you have too much of it, it can kill you. I
yep,
mean, so to have the power to be able to dispense insulin to yourself, that's a big responsibility to put on someone. So I think it's amazing that you guys are even giving him the tidbits to start owning it himself. Because, when he goes off to school or, if that's the path he takes, if he does something else, but, whenever he leaves the house,
Yeah.
you don't want it to just be like all right, here you go, figure it out. That's so, I think that's just amazing that you guys are getting him involved now. And is he interested in it? I mean, like, obviously he's lived with it. He knows, I need insulin, the kind of the pattern of, eat or bolus, eat, check my numbers, that kind of stuff. But is he like interested in the technology or like the communities or anything like that? Or is he just, 11 and it's life for him?
Yeah, probably more that it's 11 and it's live for him.
Okay.
I mean, he is a smart kid, and I think diabetes has certainly forced him to be, and has had him learn math really quickly.
So you
Like,
can carb count and do that kind of
oh,
stuff?
absolutely, yeah. And
Can
he understands loop, like he understands how it works and what it's doing, and he understands that, hey, if I'm about to go to practice or basketball, flag football, I'm gonna put 80% on to let my pump know I only need 80% of the insulin right now. So things like that, he understands the technology and how it works, but he's not super into it. Or we've offered those camps that we had talked about, like Camp Sweeney is a big one, a huge one that's just right north of here. That we've had friends, we've talked to people who go and their kids absolutely love it and say it's life changing, it's amazing. And we've offered that to him. Hey, have you ever wanted to do these camps just for type one? He's like, nah, I'm good. So
I mean,
he's never really wanted to and get super involved, which is fine,
right, yeah,
and we haven't.
kind
But
of,
I've tried to make sure that he has had type 1 folks who he's aware of that he can look up to as folks who are doing really well, specifically like in athletics, because he's big into sports, loves sports. So like Mark Andrews he's a tight end for the Ravens, and he's a beast. He's a great tight end. He's been injured a lot, non-diabetes related. Maybe it's because he gets the crap knocked out of him playing NFL football.
yeah.
But the guy's a beast. He's awesome. And so I'm like, dude, Mark Andrews, he's great. Let's watch clips of him and have him talking about. We even got to do a Zoom call with Mark Andrews and a bunch of people that Dexcom put on,
Wow.
which was awesome. Uh, which has also unfortunately caused David to be a Ravens fan now and not a Cowboys fan. That hurts a little bit,
Yeah,
but
but
that's okay.
it's
We'll
understandable.
support him.
Yeah.
It's not a decision I'm proud of, but I kind of get it. I'd bail if I was his age. Um, so yeah, he's aware. And like Blake Ferguson is another guy. He's the deep snapper for Miami Dolphins, who's a great Type 1 advocate. And he did a thing where they do the My Cause My Cleats,
Mm-hmm.
where you can design shoes or whatever. And Blake sent out a tweet saying, "Hey, I'll let kids design my cleats, and I'll pick a winner and wear them." And David's didn't get picked, but he still sent a signed autographed picture to David,
Oh,
which was awesome.
cool.
So I try to get make him aware of these folks who are successful at the things he's interested in, so he can make a connection there and realize, okay, these people are successful to where he doesn't even question it. Like, I know I can do whatever I want, right?
Yeah.
Because I hear these stories of these people who, like, there was this, oh man, what was that movie about these people who rode their bikes across the country with type 1? Shoot, man.
Oh,
I
I'm not
can't,
aware of that one.
oh my gosh. What was the name of that? I'll have to look it up.
Okay, we'll look it up.
Uh, Man, we even hosted a screening of it at Studio Movie Grill. Like, and I invited the community and had
Yeah.
people come. I can't even remember the name of the dang movie.
See if I can use the
Anyway,
technology.
there's a guy in that movie, and it's all these type 1 diabetics who are going to ride their bikes across country. And one of the guys was diagnosed, I want to say he was diagnosed in India. I can't remember, it was another country. But the doctor told him when he was diagnosed, hey, you got to give sports up. Like, you're done playing sports or doing
Really?
anything. And he was crushed,
Yeah.
which obviously that's not the case. But that was in the back of my mind, is I never want David to think that he can't do whatever he can do whatever he wants. He's got to be smart about it, and he's got to think, put the effort into it, but he
Right.
can do whatever.
Yeah. Can't just run out and do whatever, like can't just not think about it and go do football practice. But
Right.
as long as you think about it and, reduce your pump, do all the things that you've been taught, you can do whatever,
Yeah.
you know?
100%. And we've been really lucky about the community we live in. He's never really had coaches who have, looked at him differently or not given him the opportunity, and they're always great about checking in on him. And there's been confusion about like, okay, can he do this? Can he not? Or what does he need? Which is totally fine. And that's what I think. There's some people in the type 1 community who, and it's this way in any community, where tend to get upset pretty easily and
Yeah,
frustrated with people like, why don't you get this? Why don't you understand this? And what an ignorant question for you to ask. But man, I just go back to before David was diagnosed, and we were just talking about it. I didn't know anything. So I try to put myself in their shoes. They don't know anything. Let's
right.
just educate them and help
Yeah.
walk them through it. There's no reason to get upset or
Rather them ask than not ask a
absolutely,
question. And
yeah. And they're not going to know because I didn't know.
yeah,
I didn't even know to ask the question. So at least they're throwing it out there.
right. Definitely. So,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
any closing thoughts or anything you want to throw out there?
Hmm. I probably should have thought of that in advance. Huh? That would have been
I
helpful.
did leave that off our questionnaire.
Well,
I put you on
I
the spot.
probably could have known. Man, I just think back to when he was first diagnosed, and we just felt, you just felt so alone and confused and just devastated, man. We were just devastated and had no idea what was in store or ahead for us. And so that's why I think what you're doing here with Rebel Health is really cool because having a place for folks to go and learn in a community to rely on and bounce ideas off of and learn from is so huge. And I'm so thankful that we have that because for folks who were diagnosed before that was available and the internet could bring these little pockets of communities together, I can't imagine.
You're just
It
going
would have
off
been,
the pamphlet you get when you get
oh my
diagnosed.
gosh,
That's
like your story and all the things you've gone through. I can't imagine you without you being able to do that research and find those things and that help, you would be in a completely different place. And we would too, with David. So I love what you're doing here, man. I wish you nothing but the best. I hope a ton of people get involved and find that community and find that help because without it, we would not be where we are today. And we still have bad days and we still have rough days and we still cry and we still, have times. I hate type 1 with every ounce of my being. Hey, I hate it. I hope for a day where it's gone, where it's cured, and they are making advances. But that's the joke, right? Is everybody who's been diagnosed for the past 50 years get
5 years
told,
away.
"My gosh, dude." And I'm of the mindset where I'll believe it when I see it, and I hope I get to see it. That would be fantastic.
Yeah,
But I'll never tell somebody that, hey, technology's 5 years away.
yeah,
Well, we've been 5 years away since 1955 or whatever when they first started saying that.
right. Yeah, I'm in the boat of the technology is just going to keep getting better, and there may not be a cure, but I think there'll be a day in the future where other than having to load your insulin pump and put your pump in your CGM on, that's all your maintenance and care is.
It sure seems like we're close to that,
Yeah,
right? And to where,
that's my biggest hope is that we get to that point where you just have an external pancreas
yep,
that you don't have to pre-bolus, you don't have to do anything like that. Just wake up, go eat, and if it
yeah.
can give you extra glucose if you need it, if you start going low. So
And that's the thing too. Like, I think the Omnipod 5 has artificial intelligence in it where it will change your basal rates. Because with Loop, you have to give it a baseline, right? Like,
mhm.
here's the insulin, here's the basal rates. That's the 5 minute drip of insulin that he gets per hour, right? Baseline insulin, just keep him going. But you have to tell the algorithm, here's how much insulin he needs for every hour, right? But I think with Omnipod 5, it's to a point where they are changing, where it does have AI in it, where it's changing that baseline rate for you.
Yeah, my T Slim does that.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I can't loop or anything with mine.
Yeah.
There's not that capability yet, but yeah, it'll. if my baseline is set at 1 unit an hour,
Yeah,
which it is right now, if I am going low or, like trending down or, have been at like 105 throughout the night, it will decrease and, smart boluses and reduces and will shut off completely too.
yeah.
So,
Well, and Davis does that too, but it's not smart enough to say, "Hey, you told me you need 1 unit an hour, but I think we're going to reduce that to,"
oh, okay.
you
I
know
see
what
what
I
you're
mean? Like,
saying.
so we still
Yeah.
put in the inputs and it still changes the rates,
Yeah. I
but
gotcha.
having the ability to say, "Yeah, you told the algorithm this is what David needs, but we know he
Based
actually
off
needs something
previous
else," right?
times. Yeah.
So having the ability to adjust that baseline, and anyway, so hopefully we will get there too. But I think, like we kind of mentioned earlier, having that community and having the ability to bounce ideas and research things is great, but take it with a grain of salt and take what you need from it, but take the meat out and throw away the bones. Like whatever you can take from it, great.
Hmm.
But don't, we can, just like with anything in life, we get to where we play the comparison game, right? And like, oh, look at that person's numbers and look how they handle it. And you just got to be so careful with that because you can beat yourself up with that and try something that's not going to be a good fit for you. Like for David, we had to make a decision of, diet. How are we going to handle his diet? Are we going to have him do no carb or low carb? And we had to make a decision, we're not going to push that because we don't want him to go to college and away from our household and just say, all right, sweet,
Free
I'm
reign.
going for it, free range, and not know how to handle that to in a good way, right? So we made the decision like, he's probably not going to have the a 5.3 A1C, but we're going to let him eat carbs and we're going to let him teach him how to know how to handle that. And we'll let him have pizza and we'll let him have all these things, but we're going to teach him how to handle that.
That's
And
awesome.
so that's the choice we made. A lot of folks don't go that route and they want to go no carb, and that is certainly easier. It's
Yeah.
certainly healthier too. But asking a 5-year-old to not give up carbs completely, man, we couldn't go that route. Um, so we went the other.
Yeah. You really got to pick what's best for you and your family. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just not a one size fits all.
No.
There's certain things that work better for some people and, for someone else could be the total opposite.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just trial and error and taking what's out there and like you said, seeing what's best for you and running with it.
Yep. For sure.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on, driving over here and, being in our living room, playroom, and now recording studio.
The multi-purpose room.
Multi-purpose room for all to see. So truly appreciate that and, your friendship and guidance. I mean, like I said, you were one of the first people that I started building my community around. And whether it was, an honest, hey, my Dexcom's doing this, like a technical question, or just a, dude, today has sucked and my numbers have been crap and I've walked, I've done insulin, I haven't eaten all day, like nothing's working. And just that, that sucks, dude. That happens, and tomorrow's a new day. Just having someone to bounce those off of means so much. So, and I've learned so much more about what you've done for spreading awareness today that I didn't know you were doing at all. I knew you'd done the Brave Day fundraiser and that stuff, but going around to schools and spreading that awareness, that's incredible. So
Well,
thank you
most of
for
it was
that.
all selfish, dude.
Well, I
Because
mean,
I just I wanted people to not treat David differently, and I felt like if they had the knowledge, then they'd be like, okay, that's what it is. Let's move on.
well, I can guarantee you've made an impact, selfishly or not. I think I can totally put myself in those shoes as Bryson grows up wanting him to be nothing but normal and, not have anything different in his life. But I'm sure that people and kids have taken things away from all the events and awareness that you've spread. So you may have not gotten the feedback, but I'm sure you've made impacts. So
I almost made a first grader pass out during one of these.
doing a shot in the arm.
I just showed her. I showed the kit and explaining how to check your glucose. I'm like, here's how you check your blood sugar. see, there's the little needle, and she was white as a ghost. She goes, Miss Wilson, I think I need to go to the nurse. And I'm like, oh
Oh,
shoot, I didn't really think about that. Okay, can we have another friend take her to the nurse? I was like, I may not be asked back now,
but
but yeah, hopefully some good came out of it. She didn't pass out. That was good, but she definitely doesn't want type 1 now, that's for sure.
there you go. Well, thank
My
you
bad.
again for everything.
Heck
Seriously.
yeah. Thanks for having me, Josh. Like I said, man, I wish nothing but the best with this. I hope people find a community here. I think it's awesome, dude. You're such a driven and disciplined guy, and I really leaned into that for folks like you and podcasts like this. When David was first diagnosed, I could not get enough of Juicebox podcast,
Oh yeah.
Diabetics doing things, Diabetes Connection, dude. I would just every day eat those up.
Me
And they're
too.
super helpful and to learn about it and to hear ideas and what people were doing and to build that community. It was big. I would, when he was first diagnosed, I would just listen to those in my truck and I'd be like at a stoplight and I'd be tearing up hearing somebody's, diagnosis story. I'm
Yeah.
sure people next to me would be like, "What's that guy doing?" I'm like, it's
There's
just a diabetes podcast, man. It's cool. Yeah, what you do, I wish nothing but the best for this. It's awesome, dude.
I'm sure you've helped a lot of people out. Hopefully, and this episode gets out to a lot of people and gets some views. So,
Maybe, man, that'd be great.
well, and maybe we have David on in the future. It'd be cool. Have him
Yeah,
on and talk to him for a little bit.
yeah, I bet it'd be an interesting perspective for
Be
sure
very interested to
because
get his thoughts on stuff.
I don't know what that's like to be a kid with it and have it. Like I said, he doesn't
No,
know a day without it. At this
yeah,
point, he doesn't remember life without it, which I'm almost in a weird way thankful he got diagnosed young rather than
just another day.
13, 14,
Yeah,
because then they know life without
without
it.
it.
And I bet that's a whole nother challenge, I bet, that I don't know about.
Yeah,
So,
agreed.
like you know quite a bit of
Yeah,
life without it.
yeah. A whole lot of learning to do, just like you mentioned. Instead of just jumping on the mountain bike and going mountain biking, you've
Yeah,
got to really think it through. What's the day look like? When should we go? When can I eat the right foods? When can I turn my pump off? I mean, there's a lot that goes into it.
yeah, for sure, man.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thanks again,
Appreciate it.
brother.